Hello friends, Adam here with FED. Recently we've been streaming Fire Emblem 12 on the channel. We're playing the hardest difficulty. It's called Lunatic Reverse, and the enemy always attacks first. And also the enemies always have really high stats, and they have things like silver weapons in the prologue and also in the first couple chapters. So they are just really terrifying. So I wanted to give my first impressions of this difficulty. This is my first time playing through it. It'll be my first time completing it. I did start it on the channel, so I do have some previous thoughts, and I made it just a couple chapters farther than we are right now. But I think finishing the prologue is a good enough spot for me to give some first impressions on this difficulty. And I want to talk about some pros and cons of it. And like just before we get started into that, ultimately I do enjoy it. I'm having a lot of fun with it. It is difficult, but I personally am, I haven't grown bored of it yet, I should say. But let's talk pros and cons. Let's start with the pros, the things I like about this difficulty, and this list is actually longer, which is a good thing. It fundamentally changes the game, and you could see this as a pro or a con, because I actually have a similar thing on the cons list, but fundamentally it changes the game. It feels like a brand new experience, and that's something that Fire Emblem needs more of. A lot of times Fire Emblem games can feel pretty samey. Looking at the GBA games, even like Three Houses to an extent feels pretty samey when compared to like Awakening or Fates in many aspects. But FE12's Lunatic Reverse really changes the game. It makes you have to think differently, you have to play differently, you have to look at resources in a more critical way, and I think that's ultimately a really good thing. Next pro, it makes you think very hard. You can't just turn your brain off. And a lot of Fire Emblem does kind of boil down to get one unit extremely powerful, give them a bunch of experience, and you can generally just kind of win the game by having just a couple of really strong units. But that doesn't really work here. The enemies are also strong that soloing just doesn't really work. Maybe you can solo better if you use a better My unit or a better avatar character. I picked Fighter, and I'm pretty sure the suggested pick is to go Knight or Armor Knight. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's like the recommended class path for your first time playing Lunatic Reverse. But I chose Fighter because I thought that'd be cool, and I like axes, and then he'll be a Wyvern. When he's a Wyvern rider, he'll have a high axe rank, which would be really nice. But regardless, it's not easy. You can't just turn your brain off, which is good. And because of that, it really makes me feel like I'm smart. When I do complete the chapter, I feel like really accomplished. I feel amazing. That's one thing that this game does really well, is makes you feel good about yourself when you do it. Now, you are going to have to like reset a bunch, but I think the game is quick enough that retries don't really bother me. Everything is really snappy. Even with combat animations on, it's pretty quick. I usually turn them off after a couple attempts, but even with them on, it is a very quick and snappy game. You can skip stuff if you need to just by pressing the start button, which is really nice. It's really fast. Moving your cursor around is also really quick. That's one complaint I have with other newer Fire Emblem games. And by other newer ones, I really just mean Three Houses. The cursor is really slow in that game. But in the DS games, you can really zoom and get moves done, and it's really quick and it's nice. I personally really like that. So it may force you to retry quite often because it's a lot of trial and error, but it's really fast and it respects your time in that way. And also the mid-chapter saves really help too. So I think that's a big point in its favor. And the last thing on my pro list is the AI manipulation. I've never really focused on manipulating the enemy army in a way that benefits me beyond just like, oh, I want this person to attack this person, so I'll just put them in their range. That's basically all it's ever boiled down to in previous installments. But with Lunatic Reverse, I am really having to make moves and make plans to either limit how many enemies can attack even though they're still in range by having like a 2-range person block off a 1-range person from attacking, and making sure that there's all the different sorts of ways to look at it, and that the enemy always prioritizes dealing more damage although they think if they have a 2% crit or something like 2% or higher critical chance, they count that as a certainty, which is crazy too. So there's a lot of things to look into. But it's just ultimately really fun. And if you want to play this game, you should definitely look into, well, if you want to play the hardest difficulty, I should say, you should definitely look into how the AI works. There's definitely some really good guides online and stuff. And also you can probably just kind of figure it out by playing. But generally, I think the idea is they always go for the kill. And then after that, they just look to deal the most damage possible. So if your lower defense units are generally going to be targeted unless there's like a slightly higher defense unit that gets doubled, things like that, and things to look for. And also the crit chance is something you have to remember. All right, now let's go into the cons, the things that I find less good about this mode so far. Again, I've only played 8 chapters of it, so I haven't played the whole game, but I think I have a good enough idea of a lot of the cons so far, and I think that I'll probably do another review at the end to like give like an actual review of this difficulty, but for now we'll just go with this. So the cons, I think number 1, it's tedious. It's tedious at times. I know I said the game is quick and that helps, but it still can be a little tedious when you have to replay the first turn, 2 turns, 3 turns, 4 turns over and over and over again until you get it right. And it's also really frustrating when your plan would work if your say your archer Gordon hit an 83% chance of hitting, like an 83% chance of hitting the attack if he would have actually like connected, then your strategy would have worked, but then he misses. So you have to start over and do it all again. And the enemy then at that point might have different stats because there's a little bit of stat variation, like 1 or 2 points here or there every time you reset. And that can be a little frustrating, but ultimately, I don't think it's that big of an issue, but it definitely is a con. Next, the game can feel turtley. And when I say turtley, I mean you keep all your units bunched up and kind of move in a group and just kind of bait and switch. And by bait and switch, I mean you lure in an enemy with 1 unit and then you gang up on them to attack them, or you switch to another unit to kill them. And really, I don't think this is a huge problem. I think this thought is really coming from just having played Prologue 8. The 8th chapter of the Prologue is you really need to go slow. There's 3 waves of same turn reinforcements, and they're pretty nasty. And you just have to kind of take your time. You can't play quick, and I know for some people that's a deal breaker, and it can be a little slow and tedious because turtling isn't necessarily the most fun strat all the time, but it isn't always the case. Turtling isn't always your best option. A lot of times it just wouldn't work. So there's that. The next con is that the game really does, at this difficulty, Lunatic Reverse, limits your options quite a bit. There are some units that just, at this point, don't feel like they can contribute in a meaningful way outside of maybe reclassing to be a healer, or maybe reclassing to be an archer and deal a little bit of safe chip damage. But I feel like this is how it's going to be throughout the game, is that your options for the units that you can actually use effectively is actually going to be pretty low, and it's going to limit that. But at the same time, the game does force you to use all your resources, which I think is a good thing. So I don't know, you can go either way on this. Either you like the limited options, it makes you think, or it can be kind of annoying. And the last con is actually basically the same as my first pro, which is it doesn't feel like Fire Emblem. My pro is that it fundamentally changes the game, and I like that, but at the same time, it just doesn't feel like Fire Emblem anymore. Sure, there's still characters, sure, there's still the random level ups, there's the magic there, and it's still like basically Fire Emblem gameplay, but it feels so different to any game in the series that it can be kind of off-putting, especially if you aren't familiar with the game already. So yeah, you can't really look at it as a Fire Emblem game. It feels more like a strategy puzzle game, and I do think it does that well up to this point. And I have played the first couple chapters of this game on the hardest difficulty, and I think it ultimately does those pretty well too. But I see why people might not like it as much, because it does. It fundamentally changes the game in a way where you're not really meant to play like a normal Fire Emblem. You're not meant to grind and stuff like that. Early promoting is good. Like this stuff, there's just a lot of things that make it not feel like Fire Emblem anymore. But that's all I got. Ultimately, I really like it so far. I haven't gotten bored of it yet. I don't know. I hope I don't think. I hope I won't. I don't think I will. I'm a little nervous once we get later and some of the chapters get like really intense and long to see how we do. But for now, having played all the shorter ones, and then also there's still just the early game, I'm really enjoying it. But hey, let me know what you think. Have you watched the stream at all? Have you do you think it looks tedious or painful or anything? Let me know in the comments. Also, have you played it yourself? I'd love to hear people's thoughts who have played through the game, because played through it on this difficulty, or tried, maybe you got stuck at some point, maybe you have a sour experience because of that. All that, I'd love to hear it in the comments. And please subscribe if you haven't, and like the video. That helps us out a lot more than you would think. It's just one click, it's free, and it helps. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time.